in the same way and the same volume as our parents did, we're going to impose quite a burden on our children and their ability to raise our grandchildren because we are so many. So we have to do a better job of staying well. And we have to promote wellness all up and down the scale. You say, well, what's that got to do with universal health care? It's got everything to do with it because it turns out, again, if you invest money in wellness, you actually cut the cost of health care and increase the quality. And let me just give you one example. Safeway, the big grocery chain, you all know about that. They decided that they would do an unusual thing. First, a couple years ago, they went to self-insurance because they were big enough to do it, and they cut out a lot of administrative costs. But they're still riding the in this decade of healthcare costs going up. So they tried a bold move. They said to all their employees, we will pay all the co-pays and all the deductibles for all the preventive and primary health services and your health plan if you don't smoke. We'll pay for it. Okay, that's a huge amount of money. So they're sitting there trying to manage a healthcare budget that's exploding anyway, and they say, we're going to spend more. We're going to pay for the co-pays and deductibles of our employees on all preventive and primary services if they don't smoke. Guess what happened to their cost? And you know what happened to your cost, right? It was going through the roof. What happened to theirs? Very first year, they dropped 15%. There are lots of other examples we need to think through. I was authorized by my secretary in Arkansas to tell you that she's worked for me since 1983. She battled her weight for years, but as she got older, she had very serious problems, and her health became imperiled. And she had one of those surgeries that not only gives you a chance to lose a lot of weight in a hurry, but stops the production of the chemical that makes some people chronically hungry all the time. And she lost 136 pounds in a year. And right before I went home for our annual Christmas party at my library, she comes up to me, she said, take this and talk to people about preventive health care. So I look at it, it's a copy of her last year's health cost and her this year's health cost. Last year, she spent more in every single month than she spent all year this year by becoming healthier. So Hillary's plan does three things: universal coverage, more affordable, better delivery to get better outcomes, and more prevention. That's a good thing. You want somebody that can do that. The energy plan promotes aggressive use of jobs in energy efficiency, clean energy. A lot of research where clean energy is not yet economical, like solar power and cellulosic ethanol, and it's all paid for. And she says to the oil companies, we're going to take back the tax cut the president gave you in 2005. You didn't need more tax breaks with oil at $90. And we're going to put it in a clean energy fund. And as for your other tax breaks, the only way to keep them is if you become an energy company, not an oil company. We need to make a post-carbon economy in America today. We need to grow our fuels in America. We need to build a clean energy system in America. We need to have efficiencies in America. But again, these big ideas are very well fleshed out. For example, it's one thing to say a commitment to a clean, independent energy future will give you millions of jobs, and you can imagine some of them because we're in Iowa, right? So you can imagine what a biofuels plant will do and what biofuels production will do. Now you're using corn ethanol to do it, but almost every farmer in Iowa I've talked to looks forward to the day when we can move off of corn onto making it from the residue of all farm production and the growth of switchgrass or other kinds of things, because then corn prices will moderate, the animal feed will moderate in cost, more wheat will be put back in production, and those prices will moderate. We'll still be able to produce our own fuel. But one thing you may or may not have thought about is this is really good too, because you can't send ethanol or biodiesel through a pipeline, which means you've got to produce it every 150 or 200 miles or so. This is really good because it means that we can revive rural America in a balanced fashion. But something else that her plan works out that I think is really important, that I do a lot of work on, you can do the same thing with efficiency. We can make jobs out of energy efficiency in every community in this country. We're here in the school, so let's just look at this building. just looks like it's new, and it looks to me like it's pretty energy efficient to have so much light. It's really beautiful. But let's pretend, let's just take this school, and I will tell you what her plan will do that will create millions of jobs. It organizes and gives incentives for people to come in and do what I'm now doing all over the world, which is you start with the public buildings, the city halls, the courthouses, all the schools. And you get somebody to come in here who makes a living doing this and will give you an assessment that, let's say we could cut the power usage here by 30% by changing the lights and putting a certain film on this beautiful glass that will let in just as much light but keep more heat out in the summer and more cold out in the winter. And let's say you could also put more insulation around the windows and on the roof and through the doors, and all that together will reduce the power 30%. Now, obviously, it'll create jobs, right? Doing all that work I just described. And the jobs cannot be outsourced. Somebody's got to be standing on that roof if you agree. It's not like a call center you can send to India. This is also very serious. These are jobs. These are jobs will be for engineers and architects and all that. These are also jobs for people that may have lost their jobs in a factory. There are jobs here for everybody in every part of America. So how do you create them? Does the money come out of thin air? The answer is nearly. If you organize it, it nearly does. Why? Because an energy service company will come in here and promise you that you can save 30%. If you spend, let's say, $100,000. I'll just make up the number. And let's say you do that and it will save you $10,000 a year on your electric bill. So it'll take you 10 years plus interest to pay this off out of savings. So most people would just pay it off in a year and then try to recoup the savings. But if they could, but that's a lot of money you'd have to come up with. So in her plan, the way it'll be organized is the electric service company will come in and make the guarantee, then a bank will loan the money, then the bank will agree to be repaid back solely through the savings in the monthly electric bill. So if you operate the school district, all you have to do is say yes. You just say yes. Your power bill remains the same. It pays for conservation, and as soon as you pay it off, you get free electricity for the rest of the time. Meanwhile, you have created American jobs and made America more independent. That's what I'm telling you. See, it's not as simple as it sounds, but once you hear it, it's actually pretty straightforward. Those are the kinds of things you need in a plan. It's one thing to say, I'm going to do this, another to have a plan. Since you got a healthcare plan, an energy plan, a jobs plan, an education plan, with that level of meat on it. That's the second big thing. Here's the third and most important thing. A president in a dynamic time needs to be able not only to advocate change and have plans for change, but to make change. And I have found in my own successes and my failures where I tried to make change and didn't. It's one thing to talk about it, another thing to legislate it, and a third thing altogether to actually make positive change in other people's lives. And that's really what you want. We have got to move this country and move the world in a way that changes the opportunities and the impacts on your lives. This election is not really about the politicians. It's really about you. The election is a great job interview. You're hiring somebody to do a job for you, to transform America into a modern 21st century country and a force for peace and prosperity. So this is something you have to consider. And I think this is the strongest argument for Hillary. Because as long as I have known her, she's been a world-class change agent. She has proved that she could take a good idea, go to work, and figure out how to change other people's lives. We were in law school. She turned out all these big old law firm jobs she could have had when we left and went to work not trying cases, but knocking on the doors of poor people's houses in Bedford, Massachusetts to find out why their children had dropped out of school. And she found out it was because they very often had physical or mental limitations that couldn't be addressed in the classroom. She and the young people working with her put together a report and sent it to Congress. It became the basis of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.